Hello. Happy Halloween to any of you out there who celebrate it. Happy Saturday. Happy last day of October. Whew, a lot going on. For those of you in the States and West Coast, I know there's certain parts of the United States and certain regions, I believe, that no longer do the time change, but just a reminder for those of you that we change time. A cool little phrase to help you remember is that you fall back 1 hour, and when we change time in the spring, we spring forward 1 hour. So we're going to fall back 1 hour. Sometimes people change or adjust their times before they go to sleep, and our devices and electronics now do it automatically for the specific time zone that you're in. So probably good to go. It's nice to have the time changes on a weekend because even though I know people work daily, even weekends, for many of you, you may be able to kind of just sleep it off or kind of let it roll over and it not really seem like it affect you as much. So I'm partially dressed for my costume. The last couple of years I've been digging the Marvel comics. So I was Wonder Woman. Was I Wonder Woman last year? I've got my Spidey outfit ready. I'm a huge Spider-Man fan, so I've got that ready for today. So, all right, a little bit of time. Just wanted to chit chat. I'm excited about our topic today. Let me pull in a little bit more so you can see better. The topic of the shadow self really is a great part 2 in a sense of our topic during our last live stream, which was dealing with your repressed and suppressed emotions. And I want to try to stray away, particularly from calling it the dark side. Even though I know on Halloween that would be totally cool to just kind of let it go there. But I want to pull it away from seeming as anything negative or scary, which it is not. So I'm talking already. I haven't even introduced myself, but if you're here, you already know. This is Megan from Core3 Harmony and Wellness. I am a music psychotherapist. I say music psychotherapist because I have a tendency to do more traditional psychotherapy approaches, even though my foundation started as a music therapist. So I like to incorporate music when and as often as I can, and when the client wants to, when it's appropriate. What that looks like is, now that we're going more virtual, I haven't done so much live interacting with music or playing, more so really just listening my gosh, my words are not coming together. Usually just listening and really tuning into the styles and kinds of music that a particular person likes to listen to, and seeing what within the music is bringing to focus what may be happening in the person's life. A lot of times it really does resonate with what's going on. Sometimes a person might not be aware of it, so it's nice to pull in that aspect of it. So, the shadow self. I hope to bring kind of a fresh view and take of it. I know there's a lot of information out there accessible at our fingertips, but I want to share, in a sense, from my perspective of bringing this topic up and dealing with it when I'm working with clients or in groups. And I always like to start with a few quotes, so I'm going to do that. I have a quote here from Teal Swan. It says that your shadow is nothing more than a part of you that is unconscious and therefore hidden from your awareness. The unconscious is filled with all kinds of things that you have judged as unacceptable about you. And shadow work is nothing more than the art of making the unconscious conscious and the unacceptable acceptable. Whew, I love that. This is enough to write down up here so that we can keep our focus on that. So our shadow is nothing more than the part of ourselves, that unconscious part, that part that is hidden. So this is that hidden aspect. This is that hidden part of ourselves. Some of us are very well aware of those parts of ourselves. Some of us are not. And so last time in the last live stream, if you were watching that one, you can go back and watch that. I forgot, I should have put the link in this particular one. But if you go back to just the last live stream that we did, we talked about repressed and suppressed emotions. And we talked about how the suppressed emotions is placed within our conscious mind. Like, for example, someone might pull in front of me and cut me off. I might get really heated or upset. But, you know, after some time, I'll just forget about it. We'll put that in the bracket of just forgetting about it. I might deal with it later and be like, you know, I wasn't paying attention. They were trying to get over and I didn't let them over. So they just took initiative and got over. And we talked about repressed emotions. That is the unconscious part of our minds. And that is where we place emotions and we put them there and we block them. Okay, so there is the suppressed emotion that's in our conscious mind that we purposely move it over. It's like, oh, I'm really mad, but this is not the time. It's not appropriate right now for me to deal with or tap into that emotion. So I'm going to put it over here. And hopefully what you're doing is that you are addressing it and when it came up and why. The repressed emotion is where we block the emotion. It's where we push it away, but we never choose to take the time out to deal with it. And there may be some aspects there that are causing us to behave this way, okay? And that's when many times you will see that is dealing with some aspect of trauma that has occurred that will cause an individual to want to block what's going on. Okay, so the shadow self is the hidden part of ourself. I love the sketching of this drawing. It looks like the artist is called Chris. So shout out to whoever you are. They probably will never maybe even watch this video, but got to give acknowledgement where it's due. I love this because there's something about black crows, okay? In one point, they can be annoying, but they're also very a mystical bird, mystical creature. So when I saw this, I was like, oh, that is so cool. So it's that part of ourselves where it's there. We all have it. And it depends on what you want to do with it and what you know about it and how to work with it. You know, in school, and even now that I'm in school still, this is just an area with different approaches that one might study or one is introduced to. This is an area that I often feels like sometimes is not gone in depth enough, but it's really important to understand the shadow part of ourselves. A good picture to look at it in with my Tai Chi practice is looking at the yin and the yang, how both aspects are very important to have, that duality of ourselves. And particularly in therapy, it's something that I believe definitely should be addressed. And sometimes, we'll get calls from people who may have been in therapy or sessions for years or have had therapy for a long time, and they just kind of feel stuck. I often wonder within their prior or past interaction with therapy for themselves if they dived in here. Because when you dive in here, it just catapults you up to the next level of becoming more aware of not just yourself, but of other people. Another quote. This popped in my head and I was like, man, that is so good. In the book of Romans, the Apostle Paul is going through pretty much that duality in the Bible, and in this book specifically, it's talking about dealing with the spiritual aspect of yourself and the flesh. So dealing with the natural parts of oneself and the spiritual aspect, again, those dualities. And as he's going back and forth, and I want to say between chapters 5 and 7 of Romans, you can see that duality. And it's like, in a sense, he's having a conversation, but he's putting it all down on paper of these are the things that that are challenging me, that I deal with. It says in Romans 7:15, he said, "For I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate." And in this particular reference, we're looking at the aspect of the spiritual point of view and reference, and the flesh or the natural part of man. It kind of makes me think of like the laws we have in place, the checks and balances. I haven't seen the movies, but they're really popular. If you've seen them, you know much better than I, and chime in if you're here watching, or email me or something. But The Purge is one where, again, I haven't seen it, but just hearing about it and seeing what little bits of trailers I've seen, it's that part of like, okay, everything that was setting precedent, that was holding those checks and balances in place, are removed. You can do whatever you want for this time frame. And it's sort of like we're going to go there, but in respect of looking at that part of ourselves that is hidden, and some parts we know that we hide purposefully, intentionally, and other parts we are not aware of. So I hope I'm not losing you. I sometimes feel like I try to compact a lot of information in just a little bit of time, but I don't want to hold you too long today. So let's look at, what do we do with our shadow self? We all have it. Why? And what's the point of figuring out what it is and how to deal with it? Within each and every one of us lies a dark side. This is the shadow self. You may reference it here, reference as the dark side. I'm going to try not to go there so much today, because I want it to be something that if you're new to it, or if you have done shadow work for yourself and have looked at those really inner, deeper parts of yourselves, you're fine. But I don't want to scurry off anyone that has not gone there. Within the shadows of self lie great truths which have remained hidden and secluded in a place of either forgetfulness or denial. Boy, oh boy. So here's a point to make. If we don't address that inner aspect of us, it's going to continue to stir up and cause some challenges. And we want to figure out, how do we deal with those challenges within that deeper aspect of ourselves? For example, I had mentioned kind of levels in therapy, and this is where my mind goes when I'm working with someone, to see where they are at. You're coming from a perspective of, is this person able to take time to self-reflect and to move into self-awareness? And from that self-awareness, because sometimes I feel like maybe we can get stagnant there, there may be people who say, oh, I'm very well aware of myself and of these things that I'm doing and blah, blah, blah. Then from that, it's like, let's take it up to the next level, that next step, and let's pull out and work on your shadow self. What is underneath the surface? It's going beneath that tip of the iceberg. Oh, I see all these things, or these are all the things I do. Or when this person does this, I notice now, I'm paying attention, I'm reflecting, I'm noticing that I do this, and that, or these thoughts come up, or I respond this way, or react this way. Taking it to the next level to even heighten that even more is to do the shadow work. So when we talk about suppressed and repressed emotions, again, we don't use that language every day, but that is really what this shadow self contains. It's like, for example, it's all put in a bottle. Those emotions, they're all put in a bottle. And remember, we talked about what we can do to not bottle them up. This is the work. Now, some people may have challenges doing this work. And I'll tell you the reason why. And this is why I'm trying to not go there with it being a dark or deep, scary thing. And so many people will picture the reference of Jekyll and Hyde. And and though I know that there are really deep, darker aspects of our inner being, I don't want anyone to shy away from starting the work and understanding what's there, from going there too fast. Okay, so there's a disconnect. I like to put it like this. So what are we separating here? What are we not really acknowledging or looking at? Because I feel like when we get to that place of where we are tying in that self-awareness where we're at and building and developing more intact skills to draw a connection between those two dualities, we start to connect the dots. We start to connect better with ourselves and other individuals. Many times we're over here in the dis. What have we disowned? What have we denied? Here's a good example. You may see someone and say that they are, let's say, give it an example. And you may say that that person, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh boy, planets are going forward soon. So there's a lot of planets retrograde. I know it takes me a little bit more time to gather my thoughts. Let's just look at someone who is greedy, okay? You may look at a situation where someone is greedy and that really upsets you. So if you're looking at that and there's some aspect of that of course bothers you, it is helpful to take a look at, why does that bother me? What is it about that that's bothered me? What have I been told or taught about being greedy that bothers me, that irritates me, that wants me to not want to interact and be around that person because that's the thought that you have of them comes to mind? Um, Many times when in shadow work, because we all have these aspects, it is shown, and I might be getting a little bit ahead of myself, so I might backtrack so I don't want to lose you. It's shown that whatever is triggering us is an area within us that we have not dealt with ourselves, that is truly the problem. Okay? So in therapy, particularly when you hear words like, oh, that person triggered me, or what triggers you, and we talk about that in therapy. From that point, okay, we are acknowledging this is what bugs me, or this is what sends me from a 1 to a 10. You know, this is what sends me from here to there, and I shut down, or whatever it might be for that person. What aspect within whatever that person is presenting or showing up are you uncomfortable with? And that's where we go sit down with ourselves and we really focus on what is going on with that particular trait or that particular behavior or that particular action. So, the duality. Again, I'm thinking of the yin and yang. I'm going to go get a flyer I keep next to my desk, and I want to be able to show you this because it says it so eloquently. Give me 1 second here. Oops. Okay, I hope that you can see this. I found this. It's from a mindfulness exercise, and I love the words that are descriptive in it, describing the yin and the yang. And I think this will help bring in the balance because the two are very much so needed. And it's not to shy away from one, it's to understand what are the weaknesses in one of the areas to help us look at it to strengthen what it is that we're doing within that particular trait. So I'm going to bring this a little bit closer. See, there's a glare. I hope you can see it a little bit. Maybe that's better. So here you have the yin, sorry, the yin and the yang. And so there's different words, descriptive words within our symbol here. So for example, masculine over here would be feminine. It's kind of hard to see that way. Over here would be like passive. Over here would be forces. Balance. And so I love how the words within it help to tie in the different aspects of looking at it through a Taoist perspective with the yin and yang model. So come along with me here. I try to bear with me as I collect everything I wanted to share in this time together. There's always work to be done in this area of our shadow self. Most often the hardest work lies within the shadows. It must be attended to in order for us to come to our true authentic self. Okay. So for example, let's take like maybe an interaction you might have in your day. And it's something that someone says or does that irritates you. Or something about that person that irritates you. So take whatever it is that is irritating you about that individual or that circumstance or that situation and look at it. Really look at it. And it's not having any kind of judgment on it. No judgment on what's coming up for whatever might be irritating you or bugging you or triggering you. No judgment on what's happening. We want to acknowledge what is that coming up. say it's you have that one coworker that's always the criticizer, that's criticizing everything, like nothing's ever done right. So take an aspect of this individual that is presenting that particular trait to you and write down, if you can, or however you like to do it, or type it out, but you have to find a way to get it out. Don't let it just swim around in here. There's so much, like this whole brain is like filled with so much stuff. It's very helpful to let it come forth and out of the mind. Put it down on paper. Let's just say, for example, I'm just totally using an example. Tom, criticizer, man. Every time we're in a meeting, he's criticizing, nothing's ever right, blah, 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 blah. So you put this down because it stirs up stuff in you. You put this down and you look at it and you sit with, why do I hate this part? It's addressing it. It's not just hiding it back. It's not just sitting there, that's just how he is. That's just what he does. But every time that happens, you sense that part of yourself like, oh God, here we go. So to help you figure out, how can I deal with that better and not let that be a bug or an irritant to me so much, go into that shadow part. What part of yourself, perhaps as a criticizer, you have not addressed? Or what do you say, oh, that's not me? But we all have those traces and aspects in us. Now, some, it's much more apparent than others. But for many of us, we have found a way to maybe suppress it or hide it or stuff it down or not even acknowledge it. Oh, I'm not greedy. But then, maybe you can think of a scenario, okay, where am I greedy, or where does that show up? You can think of a scenario of where there was that trait or that aspect of greed that showed up in you. And it's not saying that that's the bad part of me or that's wrong. Acknowledging it for what it is. And how did that feel when you were in that moment where you were like, yeah, I was greedy in that moment. What was that? What did that feel like for me? Turning it into that internal perspective where it's like, this person is the criticizer. And it doesn't always have to be, if I can spell, it doesn't always have to be bad stuff. The critic, Sorry, you guys, my spelling's like all over the place today. What's the other one I want to think of? That's an example. Greed was an example. Many times what I wanted to share today specifically is that we talked about it a little bit in the last live stream, was those desires. There are some desires that many times will suppress and repress, but they are very important. They are instinctual. Those are desires that we have, and it's not to say that there's anything wrong with them. Thinking of a simple one is food. What would a man truly do if he was hungry enough? Steal, borrow, kill. What would you really do if you were pushed to that limit enough and sitting with yourself? Oh, you could say on the surface, oh, I would never do this. But pushed to that limit, that's that duality aspect of yourself, of what would you really do if you were pushed or stressed to that limit enough. Any part we disown within us turns against us. So doing this shadow work is really important. Remember, we talked about there's this dist. We diss it, we remove it, but we need to move to the connect. What have we disowned? What have we denied? Those parts of ourselves. So you can do the shadow work yourself. Many times we choose not to do it. Two, I truly believe that there is help with some guidance. There's some people that don't like to write down stuff and don't like to really sit and analyze what's going on. And that's when having a therapist help you with that is important. Or some aspects or places you feel stuck, or it's like you've been doing your work, but there's just something that still you're not quite getting to the level you want with how you feel about yourself, how you're interacting with people, what you are doing. Briefly, because I see we are already running up on time here. I want to give you some steps and some tools to start looking into how can I start doing this work. This shadow work steps into us being able to own our flaws, our weaknesses, our selfishness, all of those things. And again, I feel like it would be another live stream to go into understanding that the shadow work isn't always kind of like the negative stuff. We can also suppress some positive traits and things too. You know, if you are complimented in an area or you are given acknowledgement over a certain area and you just think, that's just lip service. You do not feel you actually meet up to that. That is where your self-confidence, that self-esteem is low. Even though you're being told that the opposite. So there are some positive things and traits that you have that you could be suppressed to, because I believe that's when we have to go in there and rework that thought and that belief system. Where did that stem from? Where did that come from? You know, you could paint a beautiful picture or draw a beautiful picture and you see all of the flaws and you see, well, this should have been darker here, that should have been lighter, and you're critiquing all of the stuff and everyone around you is giving you kudos, but you can't even tap into what's being said. There's a blockage there. So what's going on in that area that you cannot receive that? So you're looking at, you know, places where you are owning your flaws. Some people might say, I do that really well already. And you might be doing this really well, so much to the point that you are not allowing the positive accolades to come in for you. The focus is too much on that. Remember, we're dancing with the balance of the things that are going well and good and that you do well, and the things that there's just room for improvement. In every single one of us, there's always room for improvement. When we do shadow work, this will help us improve in our relationships. You will notice, hopefully, if you're doing the work and you need assistance or a guide or a guidance or a therapist to do that, get it. You should notice improvement in your relationships. You should be able to increase that confidence where you're just so down in the dumps on yourself and about yourself. Okay, develop better self-knowledge of yourself and how you interact and work with others. Okay, so some steps that you can start taking to do your own shadow work. You have to start to create a dialogue. And oftentimes, you know, you hear specifically in therapy, not everyone does it or likes to do it, is to journal or to find a way to write down, jot down what's coming up. Because we're human, there's so much stuff in our mind. And usually I feel like if I can get it out of here onto something, whether it's music, I'm sitting down and I'm playing, or I'm drawing, or I'm out on a run, or I'm out exercising, or I'm outside and I'm trying to refocus and get my mind to pull it away from what it just keeps spinning around in. You have to find a way to create dialogue with what's happening with the shadow parts, those parts that you have disowned or denied. These are the parts that were told to you were unacceptable. You know, it's unacceptable to be that way or to feel that way. This is the unacceptable. So we stuff it, we hide it. That's not allowed. We're not going to do it. We're not going to go there. It's still there. Where is it going? it's going in that suppressed and repressed cycle, and it's going down. Here's something unacceptable. You're out and about doing something, and kids are the best at this, because oftentimes it's, of course, I've worked in facilities with children and adolescents, and we use that word a lot, and I'm always trying to think of, I need to say something else. I hear this all the time. You say, oh, that behavior is unacceptable. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. They know it's unacceptable, and they're gonna do it anyway. So to really rev up in our shadow self, we want to look at that unacceptable that we have suppressed and pressed down so much, that one, we're like, okay, that's suppressed so much. I don't even know how to acknowledge it, or if there's even a reason to acknowledge it. But it's like one of those things where I just think of different movies and films where, like, in the spur of the moment, like a person did a random thing and it was so inappropriate. Like, that's the unacceptable, the inappropriate. Let's deal with that. Let's talk about that. Because sometimes when I'm interacting with the client, I'll go, what did you really want to do? Or what did you really want to say? And they're like, I really want to do such and such. And so that's where that dialogue, whether you are choosing to have that with a therapist or you're journaling it down, you can say, ran into such and such today. And I wanted to da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So you, of course, because that's unacceptable, I'm going to say, I said this, but I really wanted that. And so we're diving deep into, what if, again, like kind of thinking of the Purge film, what if you had that moment in time where you didn't have those constraints and you could just be your true, authentic self? That is the work that we do. That is the aspect in therapy that I like to bring up and say, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm like, okay, that's cool. That lets me see the aspect of who you really and truly are and how you try to regulate yourself. This is important. The aspect of being able to regulate yourself, saying, I really wanted to do, I really wanted to say, that's that shadow. Because we're told, that's unacceptable. That's inappropriate behavior. I'm thinking of that as the aspect of when we were children. And so as we grow into adultness, oh my gosh, for some of us is such a challenge. And then for some of us, we can go into a space where we can get so numb to the real true aspect of, this is how I really feel, it's getting real on the situation. And so oftentimes we're not able to do that by ourselves and writing it down. It's so helpful. It triggers and invigorates a different energy when you are able to talk about it, or we're able to, there's that song. It's like, oh yeah, and you're feeling it in your body. And you're like, that's why some people are like, oh, that's such inappropriate stuff. And it's like, they're using a creative aspect to express how they're feeling, whether it's sadness or they're in love or they're pissed off and they're angry, and you can hear it. You have to allow it a space for it to be appropriate. That's why the creative arts are so beautiful. Allow it to be appropriate. I'm thinking of really quickly as an example, pictures, nudity of pictures of sketches of drawings of people who are nude. It's like, oh my gosh, that's so inappropriate. But like in that space, in that aspect, that is an appropriate space to express maybe your love or interest in the body. It's so you have to find a way and a space for yourself that stuff is in a space where the restrictions are off, and it's an appropriate time for me to express and to dive into that feeling, that trait, that character, that behavior, that action. Okay. Okay, this one is, I know this one's going to be a little bit tricky. There's a mirror exercise. There's 2 more things, and then I'll wrap it up. We're going in a little bit over. There's a mirror exercise, and I know this can be really uncomfortable for people with mirrors, but there's an exercise where you look yourself in the mirror and you say that particular shadow trait that you are. For example, we were talking about greed. And you're dealing with someone that they're greedy, and you're just like, it just bugs you, irritates you. So there's an aspect of yourself also that there is some greed, either one, we have denied it, or we just completely have just disowned it and said, I was always told that it's not cool to be greedy, so I'm not going to go there. But what aspect of it do you have of you in you a little bit? Acknowledge it. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong. It's better to acknowledge where that is and what it is for you than not. So you would stare in the mirror and say, I am greedy. I am greedy of blah, blah, blah. So you're looking at yourself. You're not denying it. You're owning it. It's reflecting it back into you. Remember all those various traits that we have, the envy and the jealousy and the greed. Those are the parts of our duality. Now we are taught to either, one, that's not cool, you don't do that. And it's like, okay, then it's like, well, where did that go? It's still there somewhere. Well, what is it doing? Aha. We want you to come to understand, where did it go? Why? First of all, why? Oh, I was just told that wasn't a cool thing. Like I brought up a little bit about hate. Like we've been hearing that a lot these last couple months. Hatred. You know, people say, I've never seen the amount of hate like I've seen in our country right now. You know, and we're automatically, of course, taught it's not cool to hate. But I share with you an example. It depends on what you're hating. I hate Brussels sprouts. And it's okay to say I hate Brussels sprouts. There's a certain context of hate that's okay. There are certain contexts of hate that's not okay, because hate is a very powerful emotion and trait, because we see it often leading towards violence. But because I hate Brussels sprouts, that doesn't mean I'm gonna hurt someone. That just means if you offer me Brussels sprouts, or we're out to eat, or you make dinner for me, I'm going to respectfully decline and say, no, thank you, no Brussels sprouts for me. So we want to look at those things, right? You know, when we're teaching kids, oh, it's not cool to hate. And it's like, okay, but I hate vegetables. So this is the part where I want to bring in really sitting and looking at what we were taught, and as we have grown into our adulthood, what did we really do with it? There are different aspects of those things, like greed, for example. Like, here's another thing. I do not like to share my popcorn. I'm greedy with my popcorn. Like my bucket of popcorn when we were in the movies, it's like, this one is mine. You get your own. In a sense, that could be seen as being greedy, or you're so greedy. I'm like, I'm sorry, this is mine. So there's different aspects that we want to look at it on. And when does it get to the point where it's seen as a negative? Okay. Okay, so looking yourself in the mirror and acknowledging that part. Say, you know what? I am greedy with my popcorn. I do not like to share my popcorn. And these are just examples, okay? Just a little bit lighter ones. Okay, some questions you can ask is, what is the thing I fear most about finding out about myself? What is the biggest lie I've told myself? What script am I going by? What is the thing I'm most ashamed of if others find out? Woo! That's a good one. I kind of feel like if you're not sure where to start with like going into some shadow work, that is a good one. What is the thing that you are most ashamed of if others found out? Ooh, that's a lot. When did I start to reject this aspect of myself? And last, and there's more, but to condense it, who made me ashamed of it? You know, that example I gave you, you know, when we're taught, it's not, you don't hate. And again, hate in different contexts. It's okay to hate green peas. It's not okay to hate people, places, things. It's like, what are the contexts where hate is okay? Now, someone might say, I hate, you know, I'm just going to give a name of a city. And no harm in anyone that may live in this area. Please, I'm just using an example. Someone may say, I hate Flagstaff. Okay, what is it about Flagstaff that you hate? Now, you really pushing the buttons when you say you hate a specific person or you hate a specific group of people. That's a whole different ball of wax, right? That's a whole, I mean, that's taking it to a whole different set. And this is where we find ourselves in a country. Now, that doesn't mean you have to go around loving everybody. If that's not your prerogative, that's not your prerogative. We're told to love and love everyone. There's different levels and different contexts of love, right? So at the end of the day, we must own up to respecting ourselves and others. We must own up to respecting ourselves and others. And wherever in that aspect, there is some restriction there, that is important to deal with, to come to terms with, to understand what's behind it. Like, for example, if you take a group of people that have caused another group of people a lot of harm, or have caused a lot of distress to another group of people, you might say, I hate that group of people. I think we have to turn the context around and say, I hate the actions of that group of people. You see how that sounds different? I hate the actions of that group. Let's get specific so that it softens. Because again, I hate to have a client deny any aspects of where they're at or where they're feeling. I hate blah, blah, blah. Okay, you hate it. What is it about it that you hate? There are things that lead into you hating something. And what does that involve? I hate the actions and behaviors of this group of people that have caused harm and distress to this other group. I wrap it around a whole different way. It takes a different light to it. So these dualities are important. We need them. We need them. Okay, to wrap it up, I know I'm taking you longer than you probably wanted to be. I try to make the live streams not too long. Some good resources for you if you're interested. Please, if you're, I forgot to say, this is probably one of those that you want to write down notes. Resources to do some shadow work. I'm a nerd. I like to read. Some people do not like to read. We are so blessed and lucky this day and age because we've got so many things, Audible books and all of this stuff. If we're not prone or like to read very much, or we get distracted or we can't get into it. Meeting the Shadow. This is by Connie Zeg and Jeremiah Abrams. It's called Meeting the Shadow, the Hidden Power of the Dark Side of the Human Nature. Again, I was trying to stay away from the context of the dark side, but that's a good resource. Meeting the Shadow. There's a shadow work journal by Jessica Cross. Of course, you know, all of this stuff we can find on Amazon, or if you're trying to support your local bookstore, which I'm like, woohoo, if we have local bookstores anymore, I miss those. You can ask them if they can order it for you if you want to definitely support anyone local in your community. Next one is Owning Your Own Shadow, Understanding the Dark Side of the Psyche by Robert Johnson. So first of all, we have to give kudos to Carl Jung, who was the pioneer psychologist who coined this term, the shadow self. He was one of those that really started to bring forth that concept of the ego, the conscious, the unconscious, the id, the shadow self. Yeah, so this is the work that we need to do. And of course, last resource to mention to you today are the Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious by Carl Jung, the second edition. So I hope that was a good introduction for you. I hope you're able to follow and track where I was going with that. Snapshot, the shadow self is nothing to be afraid of. It's definitely an aspect of ourselves that we all should take time out and responsibility to work on. It's that hidden part of ourselves. It's that disconnect. It's that place where we disown or deny any of the emotions and feelings. So suppressed and repressed emotions, they go into the shadow part. We want to own up to our flaws. Now, some people say that they do that really well. Well, let's sit with what are the flaws, or what are the perceived flaws I believe I have? Why do you say they're flaws? Who told you they were flaws? Where do they come from? Getting into all that. That's where you have to go to do this deep inner work. Okay, the shadow self. This is the hidden part we stuff because we have been told that something that we thought that an action or behavior was unacceptable or inappropriate. And when we were told that it was unacceptable or inappropriate, we stuffed it, we squashed it, we tried to stop it. But as of course we see in children, it still pops up. It's like, I've told you, I've said, you're doing that again. It still pops up. Now in adults, in our adultness, how is this showing up? What is it that you, in something that you think or you want to do, and you hear this? You hear that's unacceptable or that's inappropriate right now. Especially, I know for me, like someone will say something, someone will be talking, I'm like, okay, that's not appropriate, Megan, right now. I have that self-talk. So where is it that you do that for yourself? Sit and think about those things. It's so helpful to write it down. Because like I said, this is going all the time. Our brain's like, write it down. When it pops up, be like, oh my gosh, this was what was going on. And I wanted to say this. And that little voice said, So the shadow work, that's really leveling up. If you're in therapy or been in therapy for a while and you're like, I don't know, is there any more else that I could learn about myself? Dude, we're always learning about ourselves all the time. We're not always the best at it. We're not always at the top of our game. So we assess, man, I didn't do that very well this time, or the way it went in my head, it did not go that way when I interacted with them, and now it seems like things are worse. So we're always learning about ourselves. There's always that ebb and flow. All right. And so we're always going to be assessing and reassessing. This is work you're doing all the time. Like you may feel that like perhaps symptoms are lessened and lowered due to your therapy, which is good. You may feel like you're understanding and coming around to aspects of like things that you do and how to adjust those things, and interactions are better. And then you feel like, I still feel like there's something more. That's something more is doing the shadow self, doing that personal shadow self work. So if you need help, please reach out to me. And I would be glad and happy to assist you with diving even deeper and looking at that reflection of that shadow aspect of yourself. Know that we all have it. Think in your mind anything that comes up that is deemed inappropriate or unacceptable. That is part of the shadow self. And so whatever, remember, like my quote said, I have to see that again at the end because it's such a beautiful quote, right? Any part we disown within us turns against us. So we want to own up to that shadow aspect of ourselves. So I wish each and every one of you, if you are celebrating Halloween, a happy Halloween, a day to break out of the stuff we've been dealing with, to pretend to be something different. If you are having any parties, just be safe, but please have fun. We need to do it. Time change for those of you in the zones that are changing time, where we lose an hour. And also, it is our second full moon, so that makes in this month, so that makes it a blue moon. So please be safe. Please take time to do some self-reflecting. Reach out to me if there's any way I can help you at all. I appreciate you. Thank you for this time, and we will see you in the next live stream in a couple of weeks.